Brussels sprouts and cauliflower, onion, fennel and cucumber, plum, pear and papaya, aubergine and saya, lime, lentils and quinoa, oatmeal bread and oatmeal flour, watercress and okra, tofu and sweet pepper.
Voe used to be a blog, this type of teeny blooper blogs that used to be really popular in Norway way back. It was never my type of thing, really, obviously. However, she took down her own blog due to personal reasons, I think. Emilie Nereng, or Emilie Nereng, as I would say in my own dialect, has now started as a YouTuber instead. And now to talk about nutrition instead. Although this is... the pandemic kind of has left me alone a lot, so it looks thereby, so the contrast gets too big. I need to do something about this. There's seriously a heck of a long time since I put makeup on. So in this video of hers, she talked about this.
Vanlig melk eller plantemelk?
And I wouldn't be Vegan Dragon if I didn't look into what people say about certain animal products, would it? During this video I will be having some critical sayings about the music playing in the background, just so that they can't sue me for playing this video, because I'm criticizing her, but I also need to criticize the music, so sorry about that.
Men nå skal vi ha en liten lek, og den har jeg kalt This or That Nutrition Edition. Jeg har jo en bachelorutdannelse innen ernæring, og jeg elsker mat, og jeg står ofte for meg selv på butikken og tenker This or That.
I'm a huge linguistic nerd. If you want to have headlines like that in English, maybe you should make the entire video in English. I'm just saying, like you would have a huge base who would look at your videos, not only 5 million. But she also went on later in the video and she made, I think it's when she tried the peas milk, she said this.
Altså ertemelk, det er jeg litt spent på faktisk. Altså det er ikke gærent, det er litt salt. Jeg vil ikke drukke den liksom. Sikkert god I smoothies og sånn.
Yes, smoothie is an English word. And you can use loanwords. However, if you use the loanword, it does not give you permission to use that language plural form. So, smoothie in Norwegian, so we have smoothie, en smoothie, smoothier, alle smoothiene. Just keep that in mind. You got a bachelor's degree. I did not even finish gymnasiet.
This or that? Og da tenker jeg egentlig på, hva egentlig best for meg? For I dag har vi så utrolig mange valgmuligheter på butikken. Og de fleste velger kanskje det produktet de vant til å bruke, men noen raringer, sånn som meg, elsker å lese bakpå produkter og finne ut hva som det beste valget.
I know some health nerds track their vitamins and minerals. However, the only nutrients that we should track is some that I believe we should take supplements for, because the abundance of them are really low, and I get back to that later. However, if you look back on labels, there's 3 or 4 things that you need to look into. So I'd say maybe salt, sugar is one to look into, but more so I'd say saturated fat, because saturated fat content is basically what leads to heart disease and such, which is the main killer in this country and other Western countries. But another very important thing is not even labeled on Norwegian products, and that's cholesterol. Cholesterol also makes your cholesterol score go higher, which is also an issue. And the majority of people think they have low cholesterol because they look at their cholesterol scores and it looks like it's in the normal range, though the normal range is actually skyrocket high according to the best science on the topic. And to bring in some philosophy in here, there's something called an appeal to authority fallacy. It basically says that just because somebody has an authority in some field, it does not mean that they're right all the time. For example, that's just one example. She goes on with like a 3-part evaluation. First she talks about nutrition, then she talks about environment, and then taste. Which to me is a little weird, because where I feel like she did the poorest is basically her field.
Så hva egentlig melk? Hva melk egentlig liksom banalt spørsmål, men det jo faktisk morsmelken til kuene som skal få kalvene deres til å vokse.
No, that was the definition of cow's milk. More than cows produce milk. It's basically, as she said, what is needed for the calf to grow.
Og melk inneholder massevis av næringsstoffer som bra for oss, og det hovedsakelig næringsstoffene som grunnen til at vi vokser opp med en melkekartong på bordet.
I disagree. The reason why we grow up with a milk carton on the table is due to marketing and indoctrination, basically. The nutrients found in dairy are found in other places. Humans just tend to be the only species that keep weaning after they've gone past baby state. So there's clearly some really fussy thing going on.
Melk versus plantemelk næringsmessig. Kumelk en kilde til B-vitaminer som B12 og riboflavin, til protein. Det inneholder også kalsium og jod, og det derfor vi anbefales å drikke de magre typene hver dag. B-vitaminene viktige når vi trener. Kalsium viktig for skjelettet vårt, og spesielt for barn i vekst. Ikke minst inneholder melk jod, som mange kvinner har mangel på i dag.
People talk as if dairy is this magic thing that can produce all these nutrients that we need. Well, just eat in an abundance and it shouldn't be a problem, with maybe 2 to 3 exceptions. First one being D vitamins. It's produced by the sun, and if you live far north, there isn't enough excess sun, so everybody should take a supplement. Second one is B12, especially for vegans. There are mostly animal sources of B12, but bacteria produce it, and some fungi and moss produce it as well, so there are supplements out there. And the last one, unless you are consuming any type of sea vegetables, then there isn't any good source of iodine around. Well, many will say that maybe dairy is a good source, but I'll get back to that later. And other people say fish is a really good source. Well, fish are extremely toxic. They got metallic mercury and they got PCB plastics in them. So no, fish is not something I would recommend. And some people even claim that pure milk has enough D vitamins. Let's see what she has to say about that.
Den blå her også tilsatt vitamin D, så at vi får I oss det. Men vet du hvor mye du må drikke av den her for å dekke dagsbehovet ditt for vitamin D? 2,5 liter. Så det jo ikke sånn kjempekilde til vitamin D. Og ifølge World Cancer Research Fund så reduserer faktisk meieriprodukter risikoen for tykt- og endetarmskreft. Så derfor det ikke slik at melk usunt.
It isn't that cigarettes are unhealthy or something. They do in fact protect against Parkinson's disease. No, that's just cherry picking. You could find one study showing a positive effect of consumption of dairy, though if you look at all the plethora of evidence out there, it does support that dairy can very well be a huge risk factor for many types of cancers. And this is even a meta-analysis exploring this point, and even more so, breast cancer is at a really high risk when it comes to dairy consumption as well. But how come dairy causes cancer? Well, it's really simple. They are cow growth body fluid, and it doesn't only contain nutrients, it also contains hormones called bovine growth hormones. And in adults, you don't really grow anymore, so what is it that grows in an adult? It's cancer.
Mesteparten av verdens befolkning faktisk laktoseintolerante. Det vi ikke her I Norge, for her har vi faktisk over hundrevis av år utviklet et gen som gjør at vi spalter melkesukkeret laktose. Så det trygt for oss å drikke det, men det finnes derfor masse alternativer for de som ikke tåler melk.
Which brings me back to the part that I just talked about. It's not to come with an appeal to nature fallacy or something, but it might be nature telling you that you're no longer a baby. What is the natural process of this is basically when you grow up, your body stops producing lactase, which neutralizes lactose, which adults in the most part of the world cannot neutralize. It's basically just nature did not intend for us to consume dairy once we've grown up. Therefore, nature makes it difficult for us to do so. You should also note that this gene is actually dying. More and more people are becoming lactose intolerant. Me myself, I'm lactose intolerant. And just more and more people tend to lose this gene. Where some people keep some of the properties where they get lactose intolerant in later years, And some people just become lactose intolerant once they grow up.
Sojamelk. Begge disse her fra Alpro er beriket med næringsstoffer, så de er akkurat like mye kalsium og B-vitaminer som melk. Men de har ikke jod, så det håper jeg etter hvert at de tilsetter. Tilsett det, Alpro. Tilsett. Og her igjen så har vi da 2 varianter som er beriket med de samme vitaminene og mineralene som melk, unntatt jod. Så det håper bare så inderlig at de etter hvert også blir tilsatt jod. PS. Kuas fôr er også tilsatt jod, så det er egentlig ikke så rart med beriking av produkter.
This is why I waited, because iodine in dairy is there because the cows get massive amounts of iodine supplements. So why don't you just take an iodine supplement yourself and stop making that as an excuse for consuming dairy?
Til gjengjeld så har faktisk sojamelk like mye protein som vanlig melk, så det er faktisk en av de beste plantemelkene sånn sett. This or that. Siden denne her ikke inneholder noe protein, mens denne her har, så blir det this.
Well, unless you are trying to build muscles, proteins doesn't really matter that much, because like all the food items out there has proteins. Like there's like only 2 ways to be protein deficient. 1, you can starve yourself, or 2, eat very vaguely like 1 to 3 products, and that's all you eat all the time, which almost nobody does. I got a little bit afraid that she would go down the route that many others are doing when it comes to climate, but I actually think she did quite well.
Så miljømessig, hvilken er best? Tallene på mengde CO2-utslipp og vannforbruk de varierer litt fra kilde til kilde. Så internasjonale tall på melk er annerledes enn norske tall på melk. Rett og slett fordi norske melkekyr også bidrar med kjøtt, og da blir regnestykket litt annerledes. Klimagassutslippene for hver liter norsk melk er regnet til 1,2 kilo CO2-ekvivalenter. Det er lite sammenlignet med kjøtt, men uansett høyere enn de andre plantemelkene.
Which I see as an issue, because the meat being produced in the dairy industry is a byproduct. So all the meat that's being produced and all the climate gas equivalencies that you get out of that should be classified within the dairy industry and not the meat industry. This becomes like a false justification for vegetarians, because if they didn't kill them, then that would actually translate to even more greenhouse gas emissions.
Ser man på vannforbruket, så bruker melk mest, deretter mandelmelk, mens havre og soja bruker relativt lite vann.
She was completely right with what she said, and one of the most common anti-vegan arguments is, oh, almonds need so much water. Well, apparently dairy causes more, so if you're concerned about that, you should give up dairy. And also the majority of oats that are used in Norway are basically produced in Sweden, which there is not too much water scarcity.
Så en liten sånn PS om sojamelk. For sojaproduksjon er en stor årsak til at regnskog hugges ned. Og det liker vi ikke.
And right there, my prejudiced thoughts kind of came creeping along, and then...
Men 85% av verdens sojaproduksjon brukes til å lage fôr til dyr, ikke til å lage sojamelk. Så det er ikke et sånn veldig stort problem. Og dessuten så vet jeg at Alpro ikke bruker regnskogsoja i sine produkter. Så vet dere det.
Oi, she actually did her research.
Ernæringsmessig, de som er best, er den, den og den. Så for å avgjøre en endelig vinner her, så må jeg jo smake på de forskjellige.
So that basically tells me that she isn't vegan, no surprise really. So she tasted through all of them, and that was kind of it. But if you ask me, she forgets the most important part to look into when it comes to dairy versus plant-based milks, and that's ethics. Cows are bred to produce as much milk as possible, and they're raped in order to produce an outcome that basically gets stolen from her at birth. This produces a lot of stress, and sometimes they will scream out for days. If this is an ox, then it will make this calf grow up in 18 months, and then he will be killed for meat. That means that he ends his life. And when it comes to cows, they get the same fate as their mother, and then they grow up till like 2 or 3 years when they can no longer produce as much milk as the younger ones and therefore not profitable, and then they end their lives as well, although they're estimated to live between 15 and 25 years. This is a horrific industry that treats cattle as mere objects, where they have very vague standards, especially in the slaughterhouses. Some cows go out grazing on the fields, but that is not the reality for most animals in the world. And where are they in the winter? Well, they're inside. These are actually an Asian species that we've domesticated for our personal use, and I don't think that is okay. And that's something I think you should have put into the video as well. And then the equivalency kind of got even bizarrely easier to establish what is really the best milk. But I really like the last part here.
Så vanlig melk. Altså, det er nesten rart å smake på det etter å ha smakt så mange andre ting. Det blir ikke like god da, på en måte.
Yes, I agree. So, dairy put up against plant-based milks, it tastes absolutely hideous. I know that I've heavily criticized you now, but I'm gonna be fair with you. If you want to talk about this, then we can have a video call that will be recorded and goes up on this channel. If you're not comfortable with English, which seems like you are, then we can do it in Norwegian, but then it's going on Facebook, but I prefer English. And we can talk about this topic. That will be really interesting. So I hope you accept my offer, because that will be a really fun discussion to have.